Okay, we've got a show. We've got a good guest. But before we start, it's called Cyrus Says, by the way, in case it's not written somewhere. I've got a decision with my wife finally. No, she's not leaving. She's staying. 20 years have passed since we got married, and a few months. And so we've decided to come to a sort of understanding finally. We've written down our 5 requests. And I think this could be done by governments of the world. You can sit down and write the 5 things that are most important to you, and hopefully, pass that along. The only problem is my 5 all had to do with things in the room, and her 5 had to do with all kinds of important things like mutual funds and accounts and where we are going to invest and what will happen to the kids' education. So we're completely on 2 different tangents. So here's what I'm advising everybody out there: sit with your spouse and work out sort of correlated areas which you can manage together, because otherwise it's like you're in 2 different marriages, although that's not such a bad thing to survive marriage. Having said that, let's introduce our guest for the day in a very formal way by playing the trumpet. Kaustubh, do you have a trumpet? Can you make trumpet like sounds? Because this show is so cheap that my guest won't come on without the requisite music. Lakshmi Chaudhry is laughing in the background or irritated. I'm not sure. There she is. Hi, Lakshmi.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing.
Okay, all right. You won't be laughing long. This show is so bad, you have no idea. We've been cancelled by the UN, no less. Lakshmi, I'm supposed to introduce you. I have a formal introduction. Please correct me if it's all lies. You're the founder of splainer.in, right?
Hmm. Yes,
Okay, don't
I
worry, don't
am.
worry. It's more than that, Lakshmi. That's not it. It's not just that one line.
That's
She
good
is my
enough.
friend. You were previously the founder of Broadsheet Media and co-founder and executive editor of firstpost.com, India's
Yes,
largest standalone and one of the original digital news sites, and one which
yes,
has left a great imprint over the human mind, or all minds, I suppose. Over the course of your 20-year career as a journalist, you have worked in the New York Times, Wired the Nation. Wired the Nation is a thing, right?
yes. Wired and The Nation, they're all
I'm so
US
sorry.
publications. And I haven't worked
No,
at the
no,
New
we
York
have to
Times.
do it
I've
again. We have
written.
to do it again. You cannot introduce the guest so badly. In the New York Times, which I've heard of and read once, Wired, which is separate, The Nation, which is separate. What is salon.com?
It used to be very big in the old days, up to it's a bit of a has-been.
But what is salon? You're
It
sounding,
used
you're
to be an
introducing me.
online. It
Oh, you're
was.
introducing me?
It used to be a big, big digital
There you go.
site in the
There you
old
go.
days. Mere
But
zamane mein.
तो मेरे ज़माने में is before that. Salon as in like hair salon? Or
Nay,
am I?
yaar. It is called like salon, like an intellectual salon, the salons of Paris.
Oh,
It was
so
very
it's gone over my head
pretentious.
already. Oh, why would I think intellectual salon from the salons of Paris? I mean, that's too much of a jump for me. And the Columbia Journalism Review, what is that?
Yes. So that the Columbia University puts out a journalism review, which is this very serious journal, which comes out, I think, 3 or 4 times a year. And I did a big cover story for them on digital media, the future of Indian digital media, actually. So,
Okay,
which
all right.
was,
And obviously,
which was, 4 years ago, and before many, many new rules came into place. So.
are you complaining that we don't have freedom of the press?
Well,
From
we
your
are
haughty laugh,
free.
I can tell that
we
this
are
is a
we
very
are free.
complex answer.
We are each free in our own way, Cyrus.
I keep telling all the comedians who are crying from time to time that we just got to find ways to communicate. Isn't that the way to go forward?
Mm,
I mean, there's no point
yes.
looking back and saying, "Oh, they clipped my wings" and all that. You just got to figure it out. For example, if I want to criticize the Kumbh Mela, I never mention the Kumbh Mela. I just show a picture.
Mm. And
I
yeah,
mean,
and that isn't that the Indian jugaad? Like we always, if there's a rule, we find a way around it, right?
you're right. It's
You
in our
know?
DNA. The jugaad is in our DNA. Well, I don't know if that's
Yes.
exactly the right word, because you think you're fighting on the right of good, and when you're fighting on the right of good, the jugaad word shouldn't apply. But okay, so you're doing bad to do good. So you're doing good, right?
Yes.
What a
Yes.
complicated interview
Yes.
you've made this. I was just going to go through your life, well done, excellent, well done, excellent, great achievement, great columns, great stories, great launch. And now we've gone into let's criticize our DNA.
Uh,
Splainer just launched a new podcast, which we're going to talk in depth about, called Press
yes.
Decode. It's a news podcast that gives you the news by decluttering the news and wading through the noise. Now, this has become a big issue. Before we go and look at your entire career as quickly as we can, the decluttering of the noise. We are now in a
Hmm.
generation. I mean, we said this every day. We've discussed it from cocktail parties to panwala stalls, where news English news firstly, and then Hindi news following it and taking it to another level, and I presume vernacular news of other kinds as
Mm,
well,
mm.
all just scream, shout. They're like bad versions of me. We have this one gentleman who turned the whole business on its head, and it became like a real tamasha. Literally, it's literally
Yes.
watched like that. You invent stories, you invent ends, you have prejudices from the beginning, which are very clear, and uh, it's almost like we went backward, didn't we? In the last maybe 10 years.
Yeah, actually, if you look at the old Doordarshan clips, it's so peaceful and soothing. You're like, oh, this is what news anchors used to be like, right? It's the Arnab effect. But I would say that I would argue
Oh,
the
you're
Arnab
using
effect
names, Lakshmi.
is,
You're a powerful figure.
array.
Uh,
Array bhai. He's very proud of it. It's his brand.
uh,
So,
in the word
he's not going to be insulted.
in Bollywood folklore, it'd be तेरे पास क्या है मेरे पास वकील है, because that's the
Uh,
starting point of, yeah. Huh. Sorry.
Um, but I think it's beyond just TV news. No, I think in Twitter, what do people do? And look, even people I agree with. Maybe I'm on their side of their politics, but they shout so much, they outrage so much. I'm like, "क्यों चिल्ला क्यों रहे हो? I got you the first time. You don't have to put things in all caps or scream and shout about, how terrible the government is, or some minister
Lakshmi,
is, or, a man is, or whatever it
it's literally,
is, or
you're right. It's
casteism
like
is.
it's like a pandemic, because I've gone to college shows just before the lockdown, college performances where they're performing,
Mm,
where even the debates have become so aggressive, and you can see the role. And I mean, you're discussing things which are very neutral sometimes in the debate. There
mm.
is no real personal angst involved, and yet they're just screaming and shouting, and it's just become theater.
Exactly. And I don't think people can have a conversation anymore. I mean, whatever happened to have a conversation where you actually talk to the other person and they talked back to you, and maybe you disagreed on some things, maybe you agreed on some things. Just can you imagine if we conducted our dinner conversations like that? It would be unbearable. So I don't know why people think the moment you're in social media, all bets are off.
Also, there's no banter, as you say, where when you're listening to them, you're enjoying the banter.
Yes.
Exactly what you said, where X says something and Y says something and turns it on its head, and everybody enjoys that turn of phrase, yeah, that perspective, which is beautifully done.
Mm,
That's not that. It's just abuse,
no.
vile sort of behavior, out screaming, out shouting, and then the anchor out shouting, and the anchor taking
Yes.
sides. I thought the anchor was a moderator. Isn't that the whole idea of anchor? He doesn't exist in terms of any prejudice, left or right, literally.
And yeah, and there is no such thing. I mean, what is this? I mean, the other day I was watching, okay, since you don't want me to mention names, I watched a certain female anchor on Times Now, and she was interviewing the
Oh
sports
wow!
minister.
I mean, we've really left that wide open, isn't it? Who can guess that one? Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
know. It
We'll,
might be. And it was amazing, her entire lead up to it was how somehow the sports minister, who's just been recently appointed to the cabinet, like barely a month, is
Anurag Thakur. Huh.
responsible for, yes, Anurag Thakur somehow is personally responsible for
After the
every
Olympic squad
win.
left, he's become the sports
Yes.
minister. Yeah, yeah,
And he's personally responsible for every
yeah.
win, and I'm thinking, don't you have even any? There was no question, by the way. At the end of that long thing, there was no question. She said, "Aren't you wonderful? Aren't you wonderful?" And what do you have to say about that?
It's
So I
ridiculous.
think,
So go on,
yeah,
please.
no, no, no. I was just saying that I think, look, TV news is incredibly broken. It's not even news. It's just it's tamasha, right? I don't think anyone makes any bones about the fact that it's tamasha, and it's just given up any pretense of trying to even inform you in any kind of way.
No, there's this tragedy here, which I mean, it's which we can't avoid. Which is when you look at the whole Sushant Singh Rajput situation. I mean,
Mm,
the man passes and all that, and then it became like a soap opera, which is so distasteful, disrespectful, and after some time, just it's almost ugly and vulgar. What happened for the next 6 months, and people pointing fingers and all that. So, I look around at people like myself who start believing all these myths because you get inundated by it,
mm.
and so in that sense, it's a little scary also.
Yeah, but don't you think that there should be some kind of consumer responsibility? I mean, I don't watch TV news anymore, so that is my principled. That's as principled as I get, which is very easy to do. But then don't watch it, right? Like the problem is that it works. The problem is it
Like,
gives
how do you
them
not watch it during a
TRPs.
pandemic when people have nothing to do and then they always want to find out what's happening? So the news started playing a bigger role, like it does, when these disasters are around, etc. So I. It's a very tough one, but I just get scared that the whole generation is weaned on just a few guys screaming and shouting from the pulpit, and just by the force of their personality and the
Hmm.
act that they put on, they're pushing through their agenda. It's got nothing to do with what we just discussed, your dinner table guests, the banter, the flow of thought, the philosophy involved, the perspective involved, the context involved, and then you summarize and take in and decide or not decide who to support. That's gone out of the
But
window. It's there's no.
but isn't there a younger generation that doesn't watch TV news anymore? Apparently,
No,
they only watch.
they just shut.
Huh.
Yeah,
They
Insta
just
gives you
watch
all the news.
online. Yeah,
Yeah, you
they're
just want
just
to know
online.
how baby Lokesh's first swim. Insta tells you everything. You don't have to. You don't have to go through all this, for God's sake. I want to get into your entire life, but just one last thing. We grew up on.
Hmm.
I grew up on Tejeshwar Singh and Nirmala Mathan and
Hmm.
Luku Sanyal and these kind of. And like you said, there were nice sonorous voices in the background. I can't remember any strong
Hmm.
opinions, and somehow it's just almost odd that we've gone forward, but we've gone back in terms of media. We've grown in many ways in terms of the kind
Yes.
of media it is, but the actual presentation is not as nice as it was then in many ways, and it's just blinkered for some reason.
Yeah, but I think that's true of everything. And probably when we talk about first post, I'll talk about that. Is that even if you see digital media and how it's evolved in the last 5 to 6 years, it's just turned into garbage, right? I mean, digital news. I mean, so much of just junk is out there, and everyone is just putting out trash. So I think there's a real crisis. There's a real crisis of quality, and which is why people have more news than ever and they're less informed than ever, which is an irony, I think, you know.
Or we just get the news we deserve, just like we get the politicians we deserve, and the economics
Probably.
that we deserve, and the pandemic that we deserve. Maybe it's just karma. Just let's not fight it anymore. We- We're just bad people, Lakshmi, bad people. Now let's go to the Lakshmi story from the beginning. Um,
Okay.
so give us a little bit insight into your background. Luckily, I don't have too much, which is fabulous. So we can actually ask you
Ach-
completely honest questions. How did Lakshmi Chaudhry get into the entire journalism business, become a writer? Before we get into first post, let's go to the early days.
So I'm a Delhi girl actually, even though I'm Tambram. I was born and brought up in Delhi, which is, of course, if you're Tamilian, a unique kind of horror because all you have Punjabis telling is like Madrasi, and my actual, like my maiden name is Srinivasan. So it's Lakshmi Srinivasan, Khaye Besan, Khaye Basan. I don't know what what nonsense. So I think one of the reasons that I'm a good journalist is that I was toughened up by the Punjabis, who just heckled me and bullied me all the time when I was a kid.
Also, identity crisis, I presume. You go back to
Yes,
a
yes.
Tambram function and you sound like a girl from Gurgaon and
Ah,
they have no idea. Yeah.
yes. When I used to go to Chennai, I was a complete fish out of water. I still remember I never lived it down for like decades in my family. I think someone said Vanakam. And I said, why does he want a cup? What does he want a cup? And everyone's like, oh my God, what kind of
You have
Tamilian are
just
you?
raised the standard of my show. You're the flag bearer with that singular remark. Is this a true story?
Yes, it is. I really am so
But even I know
stupid, man.
Wanakam. I mean, you don't have to know
I
Tamil to
did,
know.
man. I was like,
Are you
okay, I was
kidding me?
16. I
But
was
16, you
16 and
didn't, don't,
clueless.
don't, you don't know the phrase Wanakam. I mean, how could you not know?
No, I don't know. My parents didn't say "Vanakkam" to me. So what do I know? Neither did my
Wow,
grandparents. No one was
that's
running
a
around in
fabulous.
my immediate, Tamil
I
circles.
have a similar story. Did a show on MTV called Bakra, and my producer's name is Vasant Valsan. So he's Mallu, but
Huh.
born in like Delhi, brought up in Delhi. So Hindi stronger than Malayalam. And we
Hmm.
went to Kerala to shoot something. And I'm asking him to
Hmm.
read the sign because the permission was there or not. I couldn't read it. So I said, can you read the
Hmm.
Malayalam? I don't know how to read Malayalam. I was like, what?
Yes,
I
I
grew up
don't know
in
how to
Delhi.
read.
I can read Hindi. I said, everyone can read Hindi in this crew. What's the point? It's like, yeah. Anyway, so these are
Yeah.
beautiful. These are good stories about India. I like this, the
Hmm.
melting pot. When you
Yes.
come from one thing, but you're put in somewhere else and you're all mixed up after that. Yeah, that
Yes.
probably
So
served
I
you
was
good in the
a
end.
I was a basically a streetie, a mongrel from day one. I didn't know where I belonged. And then to add to it, I went for undergrad in the US to this women's college, which was at the age of 18. So
Brynmore,
then there was no Mount Holyoke, which
Mount
very
Holyoke.
amusingly,
My
yes,
sister-in-law went there. Yeah.
Really, I'm so happy because usually people say, convent hai kya? I said, nahi yaar, convent nahi hai.
But I thought they were phasing them out, the single gender
No,
institution.
they've still stayed women's only. They're one of the few, but they have. So anyway, I went to Mount Holyoke. Then I ended up in graduate school in Syracuse. And mainly I had the same problem that all Desis have. I was in the, well, at least Desis who are not too stupid to do tech or engineering or science or math, because I was doing political science. So there was no like H1B visa waiting for me after I graduated. So I just stayed and stayed and stayed in graduate school. I got into the PhD program until finally I met a boy and got married to him. And he mercifully had done a PhD in computer engineering. So,
So you married him for convenience, Lakshmi? I, I'll need
Arey
your Aadhaar
yaar.
card number to file the complaint. Because this government is very strict.
Who marries a Haryanvi Jat for convenience? They're the most inconvenient people in the world.
Well, if you want to participate in the Olympics, going by current form, 50% of
Yes.
at least from the, yeah, so it makes sense. In the sports minister is to be thanked for that. The one who was anointed one day before the Olympics.
Yes.
So, but just
So
as
then I
one
got into journalism. So moving forward, I got married. We moved to Silicon Valley. And I
oh,
basically decided I didn't want to be a professor because I suddenly realized this PhD track was taking me straight into tweed coats and pipes. So I said, no, 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 no. So then I started with an internship in a magazine called Mother Jones. And then my first job was at Wired, actually. So actually, I started in San Francisco at Wired, at the heart of, all that tech
so
shit.
would you say is a similar experience being a journalist there and here, or completely different?
Uh, I'll tell you two things. One of the things that is very different there is, I will say that kids really learn and are taught. So when I started at my first job at Wired, had to write copy every day, and every day my editor sat with me and edited it in front of me. It is a humiliating experience, but it's a very worthwhile experience because okay, they just cross things out, they rewrite it, but they're explaining to you as they go along why your
What is he
copy has
correcting,
been
language
rewritten.
or your perspective?
Sometimes reporting is missing. You don't have a quote, go back, get a quote, go back, this bit of information is missing. So I learned a lot, and I have not seen that kind of training in any Indian newsroom. No one sits with you and actually teaches you how to write, and you see that effect when you're reading your newspapers and you're like, "Arey bhai, where's the lead? Achha, suddenly there's one fact, suddenly it went on to some other fact." So those crazy sentences that go on forever. So I really feel that in India, because we're so hierarchical, because the editors, the moment you reach a certain position, even mid-level, you're like, I'm busy, right? You don't think it's part of your job description to actually teach. And it should be, because in journalism doesn't work unless people teach. It has to be a teaching newsroom. So one big thing I'll say is Americans teach. They really teach.
But
Um,
they didn't they introduce this entire editor star, the star sort of hierarchy came from the Americans, didn't they? Where the editor was
yeah,
like or the flashy writer, whatever. So wouldn't they be like untouchables who wouldn't talk to the minions or mingle with them?
no, not really. Even your more senior editor, like, okay, the very big guy, look, your star reporter is not reporting to anyone except his editor. But all your, and probably your editor in chief, you may not see very much of, but all the senior editors, like your culture editor, business editor, tech editor, right, at Wired, they all, if you wrote a story for them, they would sit with you. And I think that's a huge, huge part of like being taught how to do the job and how to do the craft.
But and
You
what
know.
would you be reporting on? Because was your ethnicity a thing that they would
Oh
point
God,
to?
those are two things I refused to write about. I was very smart.
Women,
At least
yeah.
I was very stupid. But two things I knew: I was not writing about Indians, and I would not write about women. I'm like, Sala, don't you put me in a box, right? So I
I'm
wrote
sorry
about
to I'm
everything
sorry to think
else.
like that, but that's the first thought that came to my head. That for
Yes,
this, American editor with this Indian
yeah,
girl,
yeah, you're so
her appeal
right.
will be to a dynamic which is different. I don't know.
No, 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 no. I did everything. I did business of tech. I did like actual tech. I did a lot of culture of tech.
Okay,
So, and throughout my career in the US, I did not write about India. In fact, at
wow.
the Nation, which is like the big liberal magazine, it's like the oldest, biggest liberal magazine. Before I left in 2008. That's when Obama ran. I was a senior
Right.
political writer and I did 6 cover stories for them on Obama's election, on Hillary and all of them, you
And
know.
your perspective
So
is
I
never
was
about
very
as an
careful.
Indian American or as an Indian
Never,
minority. That didn't come into
never,
play at all. Did
never,
they ever ask
never.
you to change copy from a political perspective or a left wing, right wing leaning perspective, or where the bias is from the paper slant?
No, they would do things in terms of adjectives, you know. So you would put like, oh, that's a, you know, really
Right.
excruciating, blah
They
blah.
thought,
They like to
yeah,
take out
Macy's
adjectives
can't speak
because
English.
yeah. So basically,
Yeah.
they don't want you to put a spin. So it's more of that they don't like adjectives because with
Oh,
adjectives you kind of insert
color the
yourself in.
story. I get it. I get
Yeah,
it.
you
Oh,
give it
that's quite
color, right? You
interesting.
give it a
So they go
spin.
out of their way to make it sound more neutral, which is also what our
Yes.
government is trying to tell you, Lakshmi. Please learn now. They want you to be, yeah, just decolor it. Don't point us in one direction. Okay, so now bring us to, so how did you were doing so well? Let's say up to the Obama thing and everything. You're right there. You're in part of the media,
Mm.
monolith
Mm.
of the US. Why did you? How did you come back here?
Very my parents got very
Oh,
old. One
the
passed
same
away.
story. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, and
sorry.
then my mom had a stroke. So I came back with my baby. My baby was only 4 months old. So then I did a bit of mummy track for a couple of years, doing like columns here, a bit of Vogue, a bit of Mint, you know,
Oh, don't be
writing here
ashamed.
and there.
Vogue and Mint sold. We all have worked for Vogue and Mint. We've paid our bills
Yes,
through that. There's nothing
yes,
wrong.
yes,
A little bit of
yes.
Vogue. I like the way you did a dance for us. A little bit of
So,
Vogue, a little bit of Mint. Before that was Obama's accession, and then suddenly this. Yeah. Wow. Very
yes,
interesting.
yes.
Hey, listen, we all different
Um,
personalities. We have different facets to it. You can't just be a political
yes,
correspondent. Sorry. So your mummy now, you're back home. You've got the parents and all this to look after. Then what
yes.
happens?
Then 2011 is when Raghav Bell decided he wanted to do a standalone digital media site. And first person he hired was Durga Raghunath, who's my friend. And she called me and said, come, let's do it together. So there were like 4 of us, I think, but in the end, there were only 3. There was Jaggi, who runs Swarajya now. Durga, I think, is at Times now, and me. We were the 3 main people. And it was really a wonderful experience because Raghav that way gave a free rein. He just said, Acha guys, here is your budget and you create a standalone digital news site. So he treated us like an internal startup, which is really very liberating. Um, and we really, that's why I think we managed to disrupt the market at a time that everyone said, Arey, standalone kya hoga? Rediff had already kind of died by then. Everyone thought the
Yeah, they
experiment
were the
was
first.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were kind of like at a dead end. So we really kind of transformed it. And honestly, we went to, I'll tell you why we did at that time, which is hard for you to think, you know, for us to remember. But that was a time when there was actually not a lot of opinion writing, except in the newspapers. And typically they'll come 2 days later and they'll get some policy wonk, some politician, very, very serious, very, very staid, right? So what we did was breaking views. That means something happened. So all the bad things now are really you can trace back to first post, honestly. So something happens within 3 hours, we'd have like 4 copies, like written by me or Jaggi or Sandeep or some, you know, people, and we'd have views and we'd talk about the politics the way you and I would talk about politics. So we would actually be willing to say things that perhaps no one in the op-ed pages of the Indian Express or Times of India would say. For example, why is Karni Mori such a daddy's little girl? You know, this is when she was thrown in jail or whatever, and she was
Correct.
whining about whatever. So we really sort of talked about politics in a way that people talked about politics, but
So
amongst
you literally
themselves.
you were the first post, literally, like just the
Yes,
first, and then
yes,
it's just an opinion, like we're
yes,
talking right now, and just
yes,
put it on. And now that
yes.
isn't that the way people function on digital? They almost try to give
Yeah,
you the
and so
story as it comes out.
yeah, so at that time, so look, all the things that were cool and disruptive, like we had like these kind of cheeky headlines, we live blogged, we live tweeted, we did all of that. Except this is what happens. It was so successful that everyone decided that's exactly the thing to do. And now everyone is doing it. And there is so much of it. It has now become the reason that you find news. I find digital news maddening, right? Everyone has the same story. Everyone has the same, has these hot
Yeah,
takes. Everyone has like, and so much kachara, like SEO optimized, right? तुम 4 headline डालो with 4 things that Google likes, and
I
then
feel
the copy is shit.
yeah,
There's
that's
nothing in
what the
that
opposite
story
has
actually.
happened. There's a lot of flamboyance about check out this breaking news, and after 2 lines,
Yes,
there's nothing in it. But there's a lot of
exactly,
color and fanfare and pompous
exactly,
sort of opening to it, and then boom, nothing.
exactly,
It's a bit like
exactly.
my speeches. Yeah, very
So,
disappointing. Yeah,
and even in Twitter, every time someone sneezes, it has to be a breaking headline on Twitter with one of these news handles, right? So we kind of we totally disrupted the market. We showed that you can be hugely successful as a digital standalone things, but like all good things, when they're taken to the extreme and everyone starts to do it, it has become too much now. Now it's become what I call like news pollution. Basically, we're like in a big garbage dump.
you
85 to
corrupted your own
90%.
system.
Yes, we did. Yeah, inadvertently. I don't think that was the intent, right? We're all victims of our own success, is what I would say. And so now you have a situation, Cyrus, where, let's face it, if there are 100 news links, 85 to 90 are junk. I said they're just garbage. Okay, maybe another 5% you're not interested in. It's not your thing, right? Patani, some LIC has, done something with their shares or whatever. And then you have only 5% that actually you care about. But now you have to go through the whole garbage
Yeah.
dump to find that 5% that is interesting to you and important and valuable to you. So it reminds me of the days when, when we were kids, and then it was fun because you did it only once in 3 months, because mummy would give you some money and you'd go to Sarojini Nagar to all the export rejects, and there'll be so much junk, so much kachara, but you'd go through all the kachara to find that one skirt you really loved or the one top you
This
loved.
is what my
But
wife did with marriage. Yeah, very
well,
similar.
see, she found the gem though. She
The
found
one
it.
skirt, I would use the skirt analogy. I do fit the skirt now. No, no, I take your point. Absolutely, the clutter and how to get through it. But you set the standards. There's no doubt about that. First
Yes,
post literally set the
yes,
standards.
yes. We
So then
disrupted
we
that.
have to move it along from there. After first post, we come to the podcast. But before that, what happened? Very quickly.
Very quickly. So then I became an advisor. Consultant is always good. You get paid and you
So you
basically
got
sit on your.
turned off first post because of all this, the copy, let's say, out there. The flattery
No,
was
no,
not
no.
up to your expectation.
No. The Ambanis took over. And then at some point they said you can't criticize the government.
Right.
So
So
it
first
wasn't
post
a
became
fight. It wasn't a fight. It was just like they said, this is the new kind of policy. And I said, okay, then it's your business. You should run it the way you should want to. So then
so it
I
became
left to
second
become a
post.
yeah, polite
Because you don't
post.
have the first post anymore in terms of you can't have your opinion, so you're going to pass it
The
along.
polite
Right.
post.
Yeah, you could just say now
Uh,
we are no longer the first post, we're not the second post because we're told what the first post will be, which is different.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I became a consultant for a bit. And then I did So Splainer really comes out of Broadsheet. So Broadsheet was my first thing of like, why do women who are very smart, well educated, talented, don't like reading the news? Like any kind of news organization, news outlet has less than 20%, 20% or less women readers. Why
But
is
this is a
that?
true demographic, honestly.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Because it's so noisy, it's so irritating, it's so badly
No, but
produced,
why
badly
do women
offered.
get turned off more than men? What's
I
the reason
think
for that?
okay. I have a sociological theory, and
This is
it's
the
only a
place for it.
theory. Huh?
Post your
This is
post.
only a theory. I just Cyrus, don't hold me to this afterwards. So it's a
Huh.
theory. My theory is men, in order to be men, have to know stuff. So when they're talking to other men, they can't be like, "Hey, mujhe kya pata," right? So they have to at least pretend to know ki acha demonetization mein kya hua, or the shares went up or the shares went down, or like Adani's like funds are in like something, right? At least he has to read 4 or 5 lines for
So
him
for
to be
cocktail
able to talk to
conversation,
the
we
boys.
men have to
Yes.
listen to the news and figure out at
Social
least
status thinking.
pass,
Yeah.
passing
Ha.
knowledge just to
Just
pretend as
yes,
frauds.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Whereas
And women don't
women
like to
have
be frauds.
women, because of gendered stereotypical roles, don't have that pressure on them. Women can comfortably say, "Acha, mujhe nahi pata," right? It's, I don't know, I don't care, right? So they don't feel that pressure that men feel because of stereotypes, gender stereotypes, and cultural stereotypes. So women don't feel the need to invest in that. They might invest. So, but then there's a lot of pressure on women to be pretty. So they might feel a lot of pressure to buy lipstick or something, or know what the best, whatever. It's about we living in a sexist society. We live in a sexist society. So men are supposed to know certain things. Women, not so much, right?
So women
But
reject the
it's
news because of their gender and their lack of interest in being this
not because of
pretend.
the gender socialist. Actually, in the sense of it is easier for them to say, you know what, it's so noisy, I'm not going to engage with it, right? Forget it. I would rather, so like one of my closest friends from college was the head of Facebook India. She hardly read the news. She ran Facebook India. She's a rock star. She said, why? She said, I'm working all day. I come back, whatever little time I want to spend with my kid, right? And then I want to catch up on my emails. And then maybe I will get to watch like half an hour or something on Netflix before I fall asleep. Where do I have time to sit and read Times of India's endless and news app, news notifications, or like she said, I don't have time. She said, quickly in the morning, I scan the headlines and that's all I do, right?
But some would say that,
And
and I'm not saying this, but some would say that women have a
mm,
bigger aversion to politics than men in India, in urban India, people of our class of
no, I
society.
think they have
That
an aversion for how negative and noisy it is, how empty of substance. After all, when you say politics, Cyrus, mostly it is, अच्छा राहुल ने ये कहा, फिर अमित शाह ने ये कहा, फिर ममता ने ये कहा. It's like, what does that really amount to in terms? It's not even a hill of beans, man. Like, it's just empty rhetoric, right? So
because
much of politics
Lakshmi,
is
you've
just
started a
rhetoric.
controversy because in Mumbai we're waiting for Uddhav ne kya kaha because he's not
हाँ
opening up,
उद्धव ने क्या कहा? Yes, I don't want to
Please,
disrespect him. Huh? I'm also
kuch
waiting.
kaho.
उद्धव ने क्या कहा?
Are you in Mumbai?
No,
Are you in
I'm in
Mumbai?
Bangalore. In
You're in
Bangalore. I
Bangalore.
only want
So
to
you
know
don't
what
even know who the
Bombay
chief
ने क्या
minister
कहा.
is because they'll change him every week. You have no idea. You
हाँ
better
ये
check
भी
the
तो गया
news.
ना.
Okay, just for people
um,
listening, this is not a sexist viewpoint. This is purely something we're just throwing up out there that are women just not interested in playing this role of, listening to the noise for what it's
yes.
worth,
So
right?
which is why, yeah. So Broadsheet did very well, but to break the gender stereotype, we found that we actually had 35% men. Even despite our being a women's product, that 35% men actually found it very valuable, which is why Splainer is no longer for women. It's for everybody.
But I'll tell you, the lesson I'm learning is that men are more comfortable being women than women are comfortable being men. Let's be honest. We've
Mm.
embraced the other gender better. We're happy to be.
Yes,
And as
I
I
would
age, I
agree.
totally, me and Aisha, my wife,
Yes.
share one razor now. We're all happy. And I must say that I do less work with it. And that's okay. I mean, she wears the
Yes.
pants. It's good, this gender fluidity. I think the stereotype has to end after
Mm.
some time. It's so overrated, the whole idea. We need to quickly, before we take a break, talk about the
Yes.
Press Decode podcast. How did that come
Yes.
about?
Yes. So the Press Decode podcast, so my team is actually all 20 something women, very bright, very smart, very talented. And I said, want to do a show where 4 young women talk about the news, right? So talk about gender stereotypes. First of all, women, uske upar young. Like what will ye bachchiyan kya kahengi news ke bare mein, right? Like that kind of bias. So we really wanted to break that. So you have these 4 really amazingly smart women who talk about news in a completely different way. In the way, actually, Cyrus, you would love it. It's so conversational. They don't always agree. They have they have great insights. They had a great, like their last episode was about Pegasus and privacy. So many refreshing new ways of coming at a story that has been very, very much covered. And I was like so proud of them, I can't tell you. And I think everyone should be proud when they listen to these 4 young women because this is the future, quite
But is it a
honestly.
bit like The View, where they have
Um, no, so it's not so much of a girly, oh, ha, 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 but it's much more, and it's more like hard
Lakshmi
news. Like
Chaudhry
last
looks
time,
down on The View, not intellectual enough, too
it's a
fluffy.
little bit of a morning show.
Yeah,
This one
yeah,
is a little more, but
yeah.
it still has that same, yes. But what it does have with The View is that very kind of easy conversational banter and chatting. So they talked about, and they do
See,
harder topics than The View.
Yeah, and Pegasus, I can totally understand because that's a very gossipy kind of topic, and I don't think it's a gender defined topic. But what if you get into a harder topic, talking about say purely UP politics and the chances of Mayawati's party to revive itself, etc., etc. Would they take those topics as well, which is
Yes,
hardcore, looking
of
at
course, and
the
yeah,
political play?
and you have to think we are the ones who produce it. We did a very great explainer on Bommai and Yedurappa's like exit that people were
Yeah.
recommending. That everyone was like, "Oh, I don't understand why Yedurappa had to go." And guess what? Explainer told you a room full of women who came up with the explanation. So absolutely, and even this hardcore politics, na Cyrus is not rocket science. It's just the way it's
No,
written, and people make it into rocket science. वो तो है ही नहीं.
no, but I want to know when the four ladies sit across, do they study the subject, or is it purely like a spontaneous reaction to a certain piece of news?
No, so they decide on their subjects before. So this one was Pegasus, and the second one was even more interesting. It was Raj Kudra, and it was pornography. And what is the definition of pornography? What is the difference between
Nobody
pornography
knows.
and erotica?
Nobody
Right?
knows.
Yes,
Yeah.
except Shilpa Shetty. But and sort of got into that space as well, which is again very sort of thorny, difficult spaces for you to talk about. So I find them very. I think it's a fantastic, different way to get your news, and it's for someone who it's a weekly show, so it's not like oh every day. So you want to catch up with the news. You want to hear like a bunch of smart people talking about some of the big issues.
No, and
That's the
you
way to
you
go.
you mentioned the demographic. Women want to hear women. Also, it probably opens
Huh,
the
but it's
market
not
up a
only
little
for
bit.
women, right?
No, of course
It's
it's
not
not. But
only
I'm
for
saying
women.
it's a nice start to women who
Yes,
thumb their nose at
yes,
all this. And I mean,
yes,
both these topics that you
yes,
mentioned, though, I think are really not the topics that are defined by either gender. I'd be interested
yes. No,
to
they're
listen to
not.
them because they
So
just very
right,
interesting. Pegasus is interesting.
yeah.
Rajkot, the pornography is always interesting. Who's going to not listen to that? But
Yeah, so it's
we'll
not
see.
defined. So it's not defined by gender in terms of topics. I'm just saying there happen to be four women
Yeah,
talking about it.
yeah.
Typically, you would have four men, Cyrus, or you would have like
No,
three men and
never.
one woman.
No, I prefer the Spice Girls. No, no, no. Enough of this. And the parity thing has to end. There's no parity. Either we go with the ladies or we go with men. Listen, the entire pandemic, we have proof that the women leaders have out excelled the male leaders. And then you can talk of the bigger
Yes,
ones like
it's
Arden
so
or
true.
yeah, exactly. Angela
Merkel.
Merkel and all that, which is fine. Or you can look at local levels. In small areas
Mm,
where mayor of a town is a female and all. Even in that,
yeah.
in a smaller
What about the
localized area,
Kerala health minister who's done so well,
there you go.
Sujata?
There you go.
Mm,
Okay, so we've got all these facts and figures which tell you one thing: empathy, sensitivity, actual care, and what we call dekbal or whatever in Hindi. It's the woman. The man is never going to be up for this
mm.
job. I'm sorry to say. I've rejected men as leaders. I'm saying for the next 100 years, no male leaders. Just give 100 years to women just to repair the world. Of course, the worst women are the worst people of all time, but we'll have to deal with that
Yes, I was
because
just going to say.
that's another level of extreme. But we have to pay a small price at the end for whatever we want in life. Um, we now have to take a quick break. Oh God, Lakshmi, you talk too much. I cannot tell you this cannot happen on your podcast. All right,
Okay,
you've spoken
no.
far too long. There's nothing left in my we in well, 20 minutes. So we'll get Silvery to join us. He's a man with a beard, which is different from a
Mm.
woman with a beard. As my wife tells me, what does it matter? Once you cross the mid 40s, it really doesn't matter. Don't answer that, Lakshmi. Let's call in Silvery. He joins us, a man who loves the news. And have
Hello,
you
good
listened to
morning.
the podcast? Good morning,
Hi.
Silvery.
Press Decode. No, I haven't yet, but very excited to. I will be listening to it pretty soon.
Tell me honestly, would you
Oh,
listen
very
to
good.
four women talking, or are you one of those men who are like, "मेरे को नहीं चाहिए"?
No, absolutely. What I don't. What if it's news and it's interesting? I will listen to it. Doesn't matter who's giving it to me.
Think he sounds sincere,
That's
Lakshmi? I don't know. I'm not getting a good feel.
no, absolutely. I'm not just saying that. Absolutely, like the news
Lakshmi,
is
why
a
is
news.
that?
You know,
Why is news
do
actually
you know he's
dominating?
going to, do you know he's going to give you a quiz? Now he's going to quiz you on the.
Yeah,
There's going to be a
yeah.
pop
Next
quiz.
episode. Yeah, correct.
Now I'm in
Yeah,
for it. Is it for the next year? I have to be on the ball, which every episode. But but but
yeah.
but it is across the world. It's still male dominated, the news business. I mean, there are women involved, but I'm sure there's no. It's not even close to parity. Is that is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, the same reason that why, one is the anyway, There are women, very few women in positions of leadership. You look at women on boards, corporate boards. You will look at women who are CEOs. There's always the higher you go, the less the representation for women, because women are simply always being kept down, right? It's a glass ceiling, whatever. But the second thing is also, I think, women have like expertise, knowledge has always been a male kind of province. Men know, acha, women don't know, right? um I remember this is one of my favorite stories. Someone who was a reader explainer, this young woman, and she said, God, I love this, thank you so much for this. Before, I used to ask my husband something and he would just say, why don't you Google it? And so she said, now when he talks about something, I tell him, I inform him. He's like, really? I didn't know. Really? I didn't know. She's like, yeah, I want to tell him, why don't you explainer it? So, but it's a big way that men have kept women down. Acha, tumhe kuch nahi samajh aata. Acha, you don't really understand these things. These are not things for you. Men know science, men know politics, men know news, right?
Lakshmi, in
So
some
a lot of
households,
that.
men tell the women who to vote for. You know that?
I know. What in
Uh,
many?
it's
But
unbelievable.
but I think that is the thing. So what you'll also find is, Cyrus, sit back and ask yourself how many women editors there are in this country, even today. Hardly.
Think
And
about
not married into the owner's family, yeah, or the daughter of the
You're
owner,
like
or
Cohen
the,
Puri you're
or
talking about. Yeah, okay, I
the
got that. I got that
yeah,
quickly.
or
I
like,
understand your Delhi connections. Don't show off, Lakshmi. Yeah, okay, fair
yeah.
enough. Of course not.
Even
If
Hindu
you're
mein,
born into it, you're yeah,
she's part of the owner's
correct.
family, na,
Family
Hindu mein.
family doesn't count.
Ah,
And even in family,
family
sometimes
doesn't
because the
count.
male is not available, the female has stepped up to the party.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So you don't find women in what I say real powerful positions where you have the power. You can be the anchor, news anchor, but you're not deciding what show they should actually be, what budgets should be given to that show, right? You're not the person with power to come down heavy on the anchor and say you're not going to cover it like that. All that power still resides with men.
But Indira
So
Gandhi was the prime minister for so many years. What happened to the women? Why did the women not go
right.
in the right direction? I don't understand this Silvery. Silvery is
Acha,
all
the bar is
zoned
very
out of the
high,
show.
man.
Yeah. He's under a lot of pressure now because he told me he has to follow that podcast. And
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
love to know, why do
I'm
you think?
I'm on the
Why do
Springer
you
website
think?
on the side. I'm on the Springer website on the side. I'm like checking on news articles.
he's doing
Actually,
last
you
minute
tell me.
examinations. Huh.
Does he have a theory? Do you have a theory as to why women don't
Silvery, do
rise
you have a
in?
theory as to why women are not
it's
seen in the news world as much as men?
I think it's just like jo dikta hai wo bikta hai kind of thing. Like if there
Eh?
are more men, if there are more men in general in the news, people are like, okay, that's the normal. That's normal. So people want to watch
Hmm.
more men in the news.
Okay,
So
in
because of
our
that, more people
podcast,
get more
how many
men get
women are
hired.
involved in the podcast? I mean, in a sense, we are
A
media.
lot of
So,
people.
how
There's a
many?
lot of people. There are a lot of women in
No,
podcasting.
there's
There's so
Amit,
many.
you, me,
Oh, in
Rishi, right now. Just
oh
us.
right. Okay.
And then we've got
There are
one girl
enough.
and is
I
one
mean,
girl. So it's like four
yeah.
men, one girl. In this, Lakshmi luckily is a female guest today. Mostly the male guests.
Yes.
So I'm just saying.
True.
I mean, where do you start? There's some sort
Yeah.
of subconscious bias. It's the same bias that I learned from my daughter. I've said this many times that growing
Hmm.
up, I didn't realize that I don't have female role models till I had a daughter. And she
Hmm.
asked me, who's your favorite
Hmm.
female singer? And I'm like, what? And I can quote, chapter.
Hmm.
I'm a big 60s lover. So any band, the
Hmm.
Beatles, Elvis, Chuck
Hmm.
Berry, I mean, just go on,
Hmm.
Everly
Hmm.
Brothers, all like Kishore Kumar, anything from here as well. But they're
Hmm.
all male. I was like
Yeah.
bumbling and stumbling to answer the question. I was like trying to buy time because I didn't realize the subconsciously sexist behavior that we all have.
Hmm.
We're not overtly, it's not something we want to do, but we
No,
are.
no.
It's the way we were
No,
raised.
and that's what I'm saying. So much of it is just socialization, right? You get
Yeah,
used to seeing your mother in the kitchen, your father going to
exactly.
work, your father coming back, reading the news. Your father reads the newspaper, your mother
Sometimes a
doesn't
father
read the
not coming
newspaper.
back. Everybody doesn't have happy families. Yeah, so that's what. So anyway, we can't rectify all this on our podcast. Lakshmi, we're ready to ask you the hard-hitting questions now from interesting
Okay.
people in the AMA section. And
Okay.
please be prepared that we can't edit these questions, so which may
Okay.
come from first post owners as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, could be. Before that, though, I want to ask, like, do you think there's a news topic like currently in the news which is not getting as much attention as it should be?
So are you saying getting dumbed down, like pushed down, repressed, or just not
Yeah,
getting
push.
coverage?
Either way, it can be either way. Whatever Lakshmi thinks that should something that should deserves more attention and more coverage, but is not getting as much.
There's a lot of stories that get pushed down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories. For example, there was the story of that 9-year-old who was raped and then burnt yesterday. I didn't see it on the front page of any newspaper today, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
For some reason, and that's something, actually, even as a journalist, I don't know why one rape and murder makes the headlines everywhere, but the next rape and murder is like treated like acha.
So what is the reason?
Every day hota hai, no one cares.
So
I
one
don't
is
know. I
one.
don't understand why. I think this 9-year-old should have been a big story. I expected it to be a big story today. And it has just not gotten attention. I mean, how can it is shocking to me. They raped her, they killed her, and they cremated her, right? And I don't know, is it because our national media is led very much by what politicians do? If politicians don't take it up, then it doesn't become a big story. If maybe
It's a bit of a
Priyanka
timing
Vadra
issue
had
also.
suddenly,
Yeah.
it could be because now they're very obsessed with the Olympics, na. So they
Correct.
have
So
their other.
something happens and then the other news gets
Uh,
squashed a little bit because you always have only one sort of lead. Like, as you said,
uh,
if the hockey team played well or whatever, then something that, for the next 24 hours, that'll be difficult to dislodge.
and it's also
Although
like
there's such different stories, I mean, I don't know.
No, I think it's much more that people just I think it's a very kind of herd mentality of the news, which is everyone chases the same couple of stories, and that is the one that gets all the attention. So right now, only things that are getting attention are Olympics, the whole tamasha with the opposition, Rahul's breakfast meeting,
Yeah.
kaun aaya khane
Yeah.
ke liye, all of that, whatever is happening
Little bit-
outside Parliament.
Of course,
A
some
little bit
critics said,
Pegasus
"What,
also.
Rahul awake for breakfast?"
Thoda
I mean,
sa,
yeah.
yeah, say, what did you say, Cyrus?
I think some critics of his said, "I can't believe Rahul was awake for breakfast," because that's not a meal. The ones with the silver spoon, we start with lunch generally. It's just
Acha,
not
he
more
has
working
shown
class
himself
breakfast.
to be a multi-talented man. In the past few days, he has driven a tractor, he has driven a cycle. I am waiting
Hey,
breathlessly for what is
Lakshmi.
next.
A cycle is because he's joining SJP. That's just a clear indication. But tractor, I tried to drive in Punjab once for a shoot. It is not easy. It is.
Yeah.
Siri, have you ever tried? You can't just drive it. He
I
made
thought
it. I
it's
mean,
just like a big truck or something.
no. The clutch. Now, see, I don't know if it's improved in the last couple of years or they did it up for him or whatever. But pressing it, moving that gear, you got to be like a bodybuilder. It's not easy. It's nothing like an Ambassador or Fiat. The old stick gear cars that we had in the old days.
No power
Like
steering,
silver.
right? No power
I
steering.
don't know
right?
now. Maybe
I
they
don't
have, but
think.
about 10 years back when I tried it, it was damn tough. Yeah. I mean, I was sweating and not pushing at it. It's a seriously
He
like
must have
difficult machine
practiced
to.
then, huh? Then he
If
must
your
have
leader can
practiced.
drive a tractor properly, I think vote for him.
Wow.
I mean, it's something.
Yeah.
It shows he's got a lot of drive,
Yes.
power, strength,
Mm,
character,
mm,
time on his
mm.
hands. All these things.
Yes, I'm going to run with
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
it's good.
that's my answer. Yeah, there's a certain herd mentality where there's basically two stories and everyone runs
Well,
after
I
the
think there's a
same
very
story.
thing. I don't think you can answer this question as to why you drop a story or not. Sometimes it's clear that the government is putting pressure or some organized putting pressure on you to drop a story. That's clear. But sometimes, why did they just leave the news space?
No, because I
And like
think
you said,
that's what
it's
I'm
not the
saying. There's a
genre which was the
FOMO thing.
problem.
Na? They don't want to miss out on the story that everyone else is covering.
That's what. Yeah.
Everyone is doing it.
But
We
who
should
makes
also
that
do it.
call? Who makes that call when you think
Editors,
rape and killing of a 9-year-old is not news, as against whatever did make the news that day and wipe it out? I mean, not that you can compare news, but it's just
editors
yeah.
make that call, right? So they say, "Acha, nahi,
Is it editors or is it just
no."
this trending? If you look at the internet, this one story just takes over. Yeah, it just takes over. Sometimes on some
Yeah,
days, and
Twitter
then
leads. Twitter really kind of drives the coverage, both in late TV news shows and the next day in the newspapers. It totally, whatever people are talking on Twitter ends
yeah.
up being the big headline.
And I have my
I
own version of
agree.
Twitter called Mr. Mohit, my friend, who while pandemic is going on and a rape is happening and genocide in another country and terrorists blowing up, whatever, he'll send me two mice fighting. So there's also that. And and that trends. And then I'm like, okay, I give up. You can do what you want. You can go to Colombia. You can study wherever you want to. You can be part of the greatest, Mughal media syndicate in the world, but it doesn't matter because this is what works. A cat crying,
Yes,
two mice fighting,
yes.
some man jumping into a river and laughing. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Why do we bother with this job, Lakshmi? Let's do something else. Come on. I'm sorry to put myself in your. I shouldn't do that.
But
All right.
I have to say, in defense of all those really cute videos, that's what keeps me sane, man. Like if I didn't have them and I only had unrelenting news, I would just kill myself. I'd be like,
Yeah, my problem is a little more
I
deep.
need my cute puppy videos.
No, accept that. My problem is a little more deep, which is that the same three or four people send me the stuff. It's like they live in a world which is so happy, and none of them are on
Yes,
drugs. And I want to know
I
why
agree.
they don't feel or empathize in a positive or negative way with the rest of the world. They have this world that they live in, which is like ivory towers and everything else, and it's the
It's like
dog.
horses with blinkers, no? They just like
Yeah,
put their blinkers
but
on.
seriously, they're happier because they're not digesting all this. It comes back to what you said about women who
Yeah, a
reject
lot of
certain
women
kind of
are like that.
foods.
A lot of women are
Yeah.
like that, who will only send me like some cute stuff, fun stuff. I have women friends I cannot talk politics with. They will change the subject. If I bring up the news, they'll just change it. They say,
I mean,
huh,
within 30
politicians are
seconds,
like that.
you
It's like whatever.
but you're going from a horrific rape of a 9-year-old and murder, and then you're going into two mice fighting. I mean, literally in the same paragraph,
Mm,
which is just, I don't know whether it's a sign of vulgarity or a sign of sustainability. That's how we survive. Like you said, you need all that just to get through,
yes.
the day sometimes.
For sure. For sure. At some level, look, we are like contrary people and contradictory people. Right? We have many
Right.
people within us. So it sounds like a horror story, but you know what I'm saying?
Sounds like a
I think we
therapist's
need all of
nightmare.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, like civil or something. Mm.
I'm Jekyll, Hyde, also Raju, Prakash, Shaheen.
Yes,
Settingpal has just passed through my head.
yes.
Anyway, okay, great. Now let's get the AMs. I want to see what people are
Yep.
writing in.
Sure. Then the first one comes in from Harvesh Kasad. He says, "Hello all. What needs to be
Hello.
done to turn the news tamasha into real journalism? Avoid watching this tamasha night after night. Needs to be an overall
I have
solution."
a
Your
I have a
thoughts?
theory. All the
Hmm.
shows should have a disclaimer saying news should be seen, not heard. So play it on mute. You know, and you literally then you can enjoy it because it's got all that movement and all. But it's not really, you're not taking in what they're saying anyway. When people are screaming, half the time the words are like, "Let me talk, let me complete, let me complete." You don't talk now.
Yeah.
It's just like a street fight with people wearing better clothes generally, and not all the panels have better clothes. Please take the answer.
Oh my God.
Lakshmi will have a better,
Okay,
more
so
intellectual
I
approach, I hope.
actually think, there is a great hunger for example. I think, if you look at Faye D'Souza's shows, they're very good. So she's doing kind of counter programming to your TV news show, right? And she has a proper, reasonable discussion. She has experts on. So I think really it's a matter of people recognizing that the audience has moved on. So
You
they
think
are
so? They have
still,
one Fade
I
D'Souza
think,
show, and you've got 30 Ornob lookalike,
no, no. So,
all over in different
but
languages.
yeah, yeah. But I understand. I know how cowardly and like how unwilling to take risks that top layer of any kind of news media house management is. Right? They want to do the same thing, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep
Yeah,
doing it, rather than trying to do something new. Right? I actually think if I was a smart media house exec, I'd look at someone like Faye D'Souza and say, let's get another show like that. Let's at least try it and
correct.
see if it works, right? And you might be surprised. So that's what I'm trying to say about Splainer. Like Splainer is gambling on what? It's gambling on the fact that people hate the noise, they hate the
Nicely
clutter,
done,
they're willing
Lakshmi. Nicely done.
to
Yeah.
and they're willing to pay for it. They're willing to reach for their wallet and say, thank you for doing this for me. I'm happy to pay for this service. So I think there's a real hunger, but I think there has to be someone has to recognize that hunger. Journalists have to recognize that hunger. People who have money, because in the end, the news tamasha takes money, man. To like even having a non-tamasha takes money for someone to fund. So it takes investors. अब इस climate में कौन डालेगा पैसा मीडिया में
Hum Dalega,
basically?
we have the money.
डाले
We've got a very big
so
outfit backing us. Sylvie,
yeah.
talk to our boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lakshmi
Let's
needs
do it.
some funding to keep the next Fade D'Souza alive. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Someone has to
I'm
fight
calling
the
up
fight.
Jeff Bezos right now.
Not Jeff Bezos. We've got our own investors.
Okay, cool, cool.
You don't want to name names? It's okay.
I
You
mean,
can.
I don't know. I have no say in this.
Even if it's a gangster syndicate, until the ED calls you, you should not be worried, right? Is that
Yes.
what we learned from the greatest
Mm.
pornographer of our times? So they say. I don't know, because one man's pornography. That's a great question. What is pornography? I think we've
Mm.
discussed that 3 or 4 times. As in,
Yeah.
and in India, it's not even clear, from what I gather,
No, it
what is,
isn't actually.
it's so subjective what you find obscene. And I mean, for us, some of the news shows are pornographic, really. And sexual coverting doesn't bother us at all. We don't even, why punish that guy? What has he done? This is the job he got. This is the film he made. Having read Hamlet and Macbeth, he came up with this. The pizza boy goes to the house, delivers it, they don't have clothes. And it's
Yes.
not the worst
No,
crime. Yeah.
it's actually quite fascinating if you hear Kundra's lawyers, like how he lays it out. Like, well, this is
I work out with one of them
pornography,
every
this is
morning.
not. Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. He himself was a powerlifter, national champion at the age of 18.
Really?
Lovely
Wow.
guy, Abad. Yeah, so we do get the news, but no, I just sometimes feel when the pandemic is going on and you've got all these other large issues going on, the way the news goes towards the so-called pornographer, which honestly, again, I'm not taking a side, but what is the? It's not the greatest crime of our generation that's going on
No,
at the
no.
same time, and it's getting the kind of news space which wipes out a 9-year-old's horrific murder and molestation,
Yeah.
etc., and it's wiped it out. We probably wiped it out with that story that day. For about four or
Yes.
five days, that
And
was
it's,
just killing
yeah,
every other story.
that's the cost of attention, right? It's like you say opportunity cost, there's a attention cost. You pay attention to this, you don't pay attention to something else.
Let's
So
accept
that's
that
very real.
salacious gossip is what makes us happy. That's how societies are
Mm.
formed. Cognitive functioning happens because you bitch and you come together and you hate people, and that's the truth. That's why we're here in a way. We do have a certain
Cyrus,
kinship here,
very
and
cynical of you, yaar.
I just like to have fun,
मुझे
Lakshmi, before I
सुबह
die.
सुबह डिप्रेस कर रहे हो मुझे.
This is because you close first post. Now I got no one to read. I told you. She just swallowed the
मेरा कर
commands,
लो.
done it as second post. So now we can read between the lines. Say this is not our idea would be different from this because this is the second post. So we just go the other way.
Mm.
Layered
So
thinking. That's how we move forward.
it just keeps going down the line. Like 5 years later, it's like fifth
Third
post,
post.
sixth post.
Ah,
Because now we'll have a multi setup in terms of government. Can you imagine with 15 parties and Rahul Gandhi as PM? And now you got to
ah.
not offend so many people down the line. Yeah. In the 16th post, let's be writing it layer within layers. Oh wow, what fun. Okay,
All right,
next
next
one.
one.
Yeah.
Next one
Hmm.
comes in from Aniket Kulkarni. He says, Abhinandan Sekri from NL once told me, it is always easier and cheaper to run a circus than to send out reporters on foot to chase real stories. Comments on the future of on-ground reportage.
It's very tough to run a circus. Secretary doesn't know what he's talking about because you don't get permissions to keep the thing. Or you have to keep the feed of so many people in a tent for months at a time. I mean, Bandakula, I've seen them suffer. The bearded lady treated like
Mm.
absolute rubbish. One of the greatest acts of their time. Wandering around, people laughing at her. I mean, you got to pay money to do
Ah,
that.
what about the animals?
The animals, poor things, yeah, really. I mean, poor elephant, he has to still do the same thing for the last 200 years just to get a little food in the stomach. Oh, circus is very hard. It's not a good analogy. But he's right. What he's trying to say is correct, I suppose. And Lakshmi, you can answer this
Yeah,
because you've run it.
yeah. So look, on the ground reporting is always the most expensive. It is also the hardest. Okay. So one, you have to think of huge editorial resources that go into sending someone out or sending a couple of people out to the ground, right? The second part is that you need to have people who can go out there. A lot of what's happened in English language, at least, media, is that people came into journalism really attracted by the glamour of TV, the glamour of Delhi focused, Delhi bound journalism. A lot of them don't even speak great Hindi or speak a regional language. तुम जाके ground reporting क्या करोगे? You will go like the New York Times correspondent with a stringer with you to translate everything for you. So there's a whole generation actually that doesn't even want to go on the ground. They would rather just do Delhi-based, Bombay-based, Bangalore-based stories. The actual stories in India are out there. They're in places that may not be very safe. They're in places that are not very hospitable, right? There are places that are hard to get to, right? So it's always the hardest, and it is the most expensive. So it's hardest to find the talent that can do it, is willing to do it. So a lot of which is why if you see the pandemic coverage, Cyrus, brilliant reporting coming out of regional media. Brilliant reporting, because those people are already out there. The Delhi-based reporter cannot even match what a Dainik Bhaskar guy can do, right? His
Yeah.
knowledge of UP, his knowledge of the people, his knowledge of the region, of the culture, of what happened, ability to get people to talk to him, right? Or her. So I really think ground reporting is incredibly essential for democracy. Because without ground reporting, imagine what picture we would have seen of the pandemic. It would have
Yeah.
been like some airbrushed, Photoshop, face-tuned version of reality, right?
So, also, Lakshmi, I don't know
Um,
about Delhiites. Sorry to interrupt, but for us Mumbaikars, we are so hidden from the rest of India. It's all about us,
mm,
okay, and Mumbai. And we only talk
yes.
in those, even when we're talking, we're doing our
Mm,
shows, we're always Mumbai centric. And it's like a 90% Mumbai centric. No real idea about what's happening in, deep in the interiors of India. Forget, I'm not even in
mm,
the other cities. So in that
mm,
sense,
mm,
what you're talking about is a holistic sort of journalism and understanding of what's happening. We can never get it because we're just into
mm.
this insular world of ours.
Yeah. And so you have to think, when you think about ground reporting and how important it is, actually the stories start in regional media, right? They start in Hindi
Hmm.
media about the bodies, right? The undercounting of deaths and all of that starts in regional media. Then it's taken up by English language media, which basically copycats whatever was in the regional media and puts it on the front page. And then the New York Times and whatever copycat everything that's there, go out, talk to the same five people with their stringer along, and then put it on the New York Times. And then all the Indians will only share the New York Times article as though wahan pe kuch gyan hai, special gyan because it's in the New York Times. But that is the ladder by which it goes. So if you take away regional media and a couple of really great English language sites that do very good ground reporting, if you take those away, we don't have anything in this country, and that is the crisis. That is the big crisis that journalism is facing now.
We should start a reality sort of league for news
Yes.
agents. We can call it the NPL, Newscasters Premier League, and we can go and source talent. You could be the coach of one team. Let's call them the
Yes.
Delhi Dynamos, and and you just for your area. And Silveri, you can take care of Mumbai Magicians. Great name. I'm giving it to
Great,
you.
yeah.
Used in
Sure,
badminton,
thanks.
I think, but it's fine. We can just keep it for now. Premier leagues are the way forward. Have your Premier League, push it, and that's the way to take the factory ahead. I'm all for it. Let me write this down because I'm forgetting things now with age.
Yes,
Yeah,
this is a genius idea.
yeah. Too much genius is just passing me by. I got to put it in a plane. Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Can we squeeze one last one in? I know Lakshmi is very
Sure,
busy trying
just
to bring down governments. We can't come in a way.
Oh, please, no! Don't say that, Cyrus.
I didn't say Indian governments, just governments.
Oh,
It could
yes,
be
okay.
China, where they're counting 11 million people in
Mm.
Wuhan. I've just read are going to get each one is going to get a vaccine for Delta now, or whatever vaccine they're trying
Yes,
to
I
use
saw
for
that.
Delta. I mean, 11 million man, woman, child, and people of any gender. So that's just tremendous. We, in the meantime, how
Yeah.
many have we got? Give me the number, a percentile of Indians with vaccines on day 254.
what is it, 9% or something?
Yeah,
10% maybe
Yeah,
just
now?
it's
around
something
somewhere.
9%,
Yeah, something like that.
10%.
So,
It's very
Yeah.
can
low.
we hire the people from China to help us with vaccine implementation?
Why?
See, they all
How have we got the people from China to make a statue of the Sardar Patel statue, na? It was all China
see.
made.
Hence, I made that comment 2 sentences ago. Hence, because it wouldn't take you long to land a blow. It's just a matter of 2 sentences, and there you said, "Mighty China will fall." No, no, no. All right.
just
Uh,
just a quick
Avoiding
thing
this
on
statue.
Lakshmi.
Moving on. Yeah.
That's a quick thing on Lakshmi's regional news point. So you're basically saying that regional news is allowed to be a lot more bold than say the national news,
A lot more
because
authentic.
a lot more
I don't
authentic
know if
and maybe bold,
I don't know, allowed. I think they're willing to take more
willing
risks.
to take more
It's
risk.
also
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So,
localization. If I could
so
interrupt,
Dainik Bhaskar got raided, na? They've been
they got raided. Can you
correct.
raided
believe it?
Yep, they did
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep,
Mm.
Yeah.
But they haven't backed
yep.
down.
Yep.
That's good.
I mean, if
Yeah,
they do, then it's over because they're the
Yeah,
biggest, aren't they? I mean, really,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
over. There's no press
yeah.
left. But no,
But they
your
take the
point is
most risks also, huh? The most journalists
no,
who are
but
killed are
I think
regional journalists.
no, but exactly. And your point also,
Hmm.
I think, is that in your region where you are the expert is where you should be talking,
Yes.
where you
Yes.
are, where your roots are, where you can give us a real commentary. There's no point me
Yes.
going to deep in the Nilgiris and trying to explain tree planting. It's just pointless. So we understand
Yes.
that. So me and
Yeah.
Arnav have to stick to what we do best: shouting.
Like for instance, like when this the whole Pegasus spyware thing was coming out, I remember that it was being reported that national media outlets and like TV news outlets were trying to avoid that topic, and they were just like sticking to the Raj Kundra story, like there's
I
nothing
was
better
so
to talk
grateful
about.
for the Raj Kundra story,
Yeah,
which everybody was
yeah.
born listening after 2 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly. But the
Because
local news outlets were reporting a lot more on the
Yes.
Pegasus spyware
what
thing.
I would have done
And
is tie the two together and said all the information Raj Kundra has come from Pegasus. So, we got both the stories now. How Pegasus
yeah,
leads to pornography. Ah,
great.
I'll write one more idea. Request you guys chat. I'm just doing this now.
All right.
Okay. Listen, we're
Yeah,
running out of
yeah.
time.
Look, I mean,
Uh,
for me, the most interesting kind of part of my job is when we decide to do, let's say, a lead on Pegasus, and then I start reading all the newspapers. It's very fascinating. Acha, isne to chua bhi nahi. Like this person has not even gone
Oh,
close to it, or this person has just very carefully reported only like what the government is saying about this,
but they
right?
still give you a nice
So
headline.
mm,
We're still the king
yeah,
of headlines. Huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. They'll give you great headlines, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to see the content, right? So I always knew, for example, certain very large media group will always have government sources and the government point of view on any controversial thing. If I want the government point of view, wahan pe jao. Wahan pe milega. Someone or the other, some chatty government official, sources said, will be happily
No, no.
chatting away and giving their
It's also the
point of
theory
view.
of relativity, which is so beautiful with truth. For example, we carried a story where India is the third largest vaccine provider in the world, and that sounds
Mm,
pretty good, not too
mm.
bad. But in actuality, what is it? Because of 1.2 billion people, we've got X amount, 9-10%, which comes to what, roughly 80-90 million, whatever the figure is. So it's more than any country in Europe. It's more than most countries across the world. So obviously, it sounds big, but it actually is not much because only 9% of the population. So it just
It's called
spun really well.
spin.
Yeah.
yeah.
Spin.
I'm all for it. And the worry is that you don't read the article, you just read that. I would say
Mm,
70-80% of people read just those 2 lines that goes in your head, and that's
I
what you
agree.
discuss.
Yeah.
They just read the headline. In fact, most people don't
Yeah.
even have the time to read an article.
Yep.
You know.
So let's just
Strong.
concentrate on our headlines,
Mm,
nothing else.
mm.
Lakshmi Chaudhry reveals all. That'll be your podcast.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
actually, you've not revealed much.
Explainer is the
I think
best.
I think what needs to happen is that the entire headline needs to be the entire story, and then the main body of the thing is just like one sentence or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
No,
then everyone will be
but
aware.
it should be like Lakshmi Chaudhry attacks government, and then the next one should be moving
Oh
on.
my God.
Moving on, and the story should be something else. Parag Sari sale 50% off at Kala Niketan. That should be the story. Nothing to do with anything.
Bhaiya.
Okay,
Like
guys.
basically, he's cutting my ticket to Tihar. That's what Cyrus is doing. He's like writing my one-way ticket.
Don't worry. You have to find a way. I told you, to be creative and innovative. Don't ruffle feathers. There's a way to communicate. There's always somebody willing to listen.
As
Yeah.
explainer, we don't ruffle anywhere. Very calm.
Yeah. So you say. Yeah. We haven't understood what you're saying yet. One we will, and then they'll come for you. No, I'm just kidding. Of
We
course we will.
yes.
Uh,
हम हंस हंस के
Cyrus,
कहते हैं.
I think he's
Cyrus,
trying to
can you
speak.
just raise your mic a bit?
I
Yeah.
could, but the Sensex is down. So in keeping with that, traditionally, because I am in
Okay.
Fountain, we follow the market. The market dictates the way it is. Lakshmi, sorry that I'm going to leave because I've
Yes.
got this gentleman
Yes.
here waiting to have a discussion with me. He's from the PMO, and it's a very short discussion, and may
Yes. And
end
you please tell him.
in
Please tell
screaming.
him.
Yeah.
I have a Desh Bhakti budget.
Yeah.
In
And
my
ask him about the Pegasus thing. Ask him
explainer.
for a statement on the Pegasus thing also.
No, he already knows now because they're
You
listening to
already-
everything we're saying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, correct. Oh,
Yes, that's
sorry.
okay.
I can tell you the guy who actually does the listening must be so irritated because you find 1 minute
I
of gossip.
know.
You've
Yeah,
got to
I'm
go through
sure.
so much rubbish conversation. हाँ तो बोलो अभी ने क्या कहा? हाँ बोलिए बोलिए. Tell me. You just find the quality of Indian conversation that I listen to when I'm walking and all. It's just हाँ बोलो हाँ बोल. I mean, it's just. Don't you think there's a lot of monosyllable, stupid points? हाँ गर्मी लगती है हाँ. I mean, just the guy's got to listen to all that just to hear.
Yeah.
Oh, Rahul Gandhi called a meeting. It's just-
It's true. And all the good morning messages, right? Good
Yeah.
morning, good morning, good morning.
The ones I really hate, Lakshmi, now that you want to elongate this entire podcast, is the happy friendship day and those kind of things. I mean,
Oh
really,
my God! Yes,
you
yes,
talk
yes, yes,
about
yes.
your doggy
Worse.
pictures and the kitty pictures and the mice fighting. It goes right there. Really? Happy friendship day? Really? Happy chocolate day? Happy rose day? Happy this day? Happy
Mm.
Mother's Day? Don't forget your father. Who cares? How can they do that to us every day? Oh, it's like murder. Oof. Sometimes I'm with the government. There's a limit to this democracy.
Yes,
Honestly.
let's cancel WhatsApp only.
Really, it's perverse. You're talking about corrupting systems. The system's corrupt completely. Uh, and the insincere greeting from morning to night that people send you, and you're supposed to reply
I know.
in the like way. Um,
Mm.
how are your children? Hope your family is keeping well. You don't even know names of my family members. Oh, hope your family is keeping well. What's my mom's name? What's my wife's name? What's my son's name? You don't know anything. F off as far as I'm concerned. Don't wish my family anything. It's all rubbish. Sorry, Lakshmi. We've all got our own
Okay.
rants and problems. Okay, guys.
Yes. All
This is a
right.
lovely
This is
show. Thank
lovely,
you.
Cyrus. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I laughed all through. That's such a
really.
blast.
You did all
Thank
the
you.
talking. Okay. Bye.
Oh,
In a nice way. You just said we need more female representation. I give up. I can't. You can't win this one. I quit.
Mm.